Hello, it's me, Christine. Welcome to my little crime corner. Today, we are back in the United States, specifically in Jericho, New York, which is in the upper middle western part of Long Island and east of Manhattan. I love geography. The Cohen family is moving out of their house in September of 1999. I'm sure most of us have moved at least once in our lifetime for some reason or another. And you know that there's always a lot of commotion going on, people coming and going. That's when Ronald Cohen noticed that one of the sanitation workers hadn't collected all of the trash that was left out by the curb. One thing in particular that was left behind was a large steel drum, and it had a note attached from the sanitation worker basically saying that it was left behind because it was too heavy to take away. The drum was actually one of the items that was removed from the home's crawl space, and Ronald didn't know what was inside the drum. He had assumed that it was left behind by the previous owners when his family had moved in 9 years earlier. He ended up taking a crowbar to try to force the drum open, and with a little work, he was able to break the seal, and when he pried the lid off, he recalls being overcome by a terrible smell and says he saw what looked like a human hand. He then called police, who came and took the drum to the Nassau County morgue, where they removed and examined everything from the barrel. They made the very disturbing discovery of the mummified remains of a young woman. Besides the remains, inside the drum, they also found plastic pellets, part of a plastic flower stem that had green leaves, what appeared to be a woman's shoe, and a small purse that was totally soaked in a thick brownish green liquid. Because of presumably how much time had passed, where the purse was exposed to the liquid, it had unfortunately destroyed all of its contents. So investigators had to seek clues from the barrel itself. Fortunately, they were able to trace the origin of the barrel to a chemical company in Linden, New Jersey, which is about an hour and a half to 2 hours away from Jericho, depending on the traffic. They were able to trace this particular drum to the chemical company because of a number code on the side of the barrel. About 34 years had passed since the barrel's initial manufacture date, until this gruesome discovery. So police began speaking to the home's previous owners to get a clue who this woman was, when she might have been killed, and by whom. Ronald had said that the drum was already in the crawl space when they had moved in 1990, and upon speaking to the previous owner before him, he said the same thing. He actually said he didn't want to open the barrel since there were stickers on the outside indicating that there were chemicals inside. If I found a barrel that had chemical stickers all over it in my new house, I feel like I'd call somebody or arrange for it to be removed or something. I don't know, that's just me. Upon further examination, the medical examiner discovered that there were 10 different points of laceration on the woman's skull, ultimately determining that her cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. At this point, her identity was still unknown. If the contents of the purse weren't destroyed, there might have been a chance of getting some clues. The medical examiner had determined that she was about 5 feet tall and was a Caucasian or Hispanic woman in her late 20s to early 30s. He noted that her dental work appeared to be done in South America, so that was at least a lead. When the medical examiner did an x-ray of her body, he found something totally shocking. The woman was pregnant with an almost full-term baby boy. As you can imagine, this is just so incredibly sad, but it did give investigators more to go on. The x-ray also picked up 2 rings and a locket that had the words, "To Patrice, love Uncle Phil," engraved on it. And remember the purse that was found in the drum that was covered in the icky liquid? Inside, an address book and some small pieces of paper were found. Detectives did their best to clean the brownish green liquid off of it, but it was unfortunately just too damaged to get anything of use off the pieces of paper. A document examiner placed the pages in a drying chamber for several days in an attempt to be able to handle them, since there was such a thick coating of slime that she couldn't even touch it without it completely reducing to nothing. So, after several days in the drying chamber, the address book was looked at with something called a video spectral comparator, which allowed them to see what was written or printed on the pages with an infrared light. This is super cool technology that allows the document examiners to see any type of alteration or editing to a page or document that you might not be able to see if not for the ultraviolet light. You would also be able to see things such as indentation marks, where previous handwriting can be visible via an impression on the next page. If something was redacted or blacked out, they would be able to use light from behind to make any writing or text visible. They were able to eventually get the pages of the address book dry, but the liquid in the drum had unfortunately lifted any ink that was previously there. But luckily, with the video spectral comparator, the methods I have just described were used, and the document examiner was able to decipher some of the names from the address book. This is very exciting because now we finally have some names, we have some addresses, we have some phone numbers, information from people who knew this woman. But remember, around 34 years had passed, and when police began calling the numbers retrieved from the address book, they unfortunately were not able to turn up anything because over 30 years, people move, people change their numbers, people pass away. Because the barrel had been manufactured sometime in 1965, police decided to track down the person or persons who lived at the Jericho house during that time. And at that time, the house was owned by a man named Howard Elkins, who worked and was a part owner of a plastics company in Manhattan called the Melrose Plastic Company. This is significant because remember at the bottom of the barrel, plastic pellets as well as that plastic stem with leaves were found. At this point, police discovered that Howard Elkins was retired and currently living in Boca Raton, Florida. Before making their way down to Boca, the police had paid a visit to the chemical company where the barrel had initially come from, and the company was able to identify that the plastic pellets were used to make plastic leaves and plastic flowers. They were also able to determine that the liquid found in the barrel was a type of dye that was specifically used to color fake plants like leaves and trees, which is exactly what the Melrose Plastic Company produced. The chemical company had informed police that this particular green dye hadn't been in production since 1971. So this gave police a reasonable time frame of when the woman's death could have occurred. As police were making advances in the case, local TV and newspapers were reporting about the woman in the barrel. And this eventually led to an anonymous call to the police department, where the caller had described where the barrel had come from and what type of procedures occurred during the making of plastic plants and trees. The caller reportedly did not know the woman, but did mention Howard Elkins by name, and said that he was having an affair with a woman who worked for him at the Melrose Plastic Company sometime around the 1960s. The anonymous caller had described her as a Hispanic woman, which was one of the possibilities that the medical examiner established during his initial exam of the woman. At this point, police were very eager to speak with Howard Elkins, since the anonymous caller had mentioned him by name and described the affair. On September 9th, 1999, they were finally able to speak with him, and surprise, surprise, he was difficult the entire time. When police asked if he had ever used barrels like this in his business, he said, "No, We never used barrels like this. When he was asked about the green dye used for coloring plants, he said, "No, never. We had never used that chemical. We had no need to use that chemical." When police confronted him about the small plastic pellets also found, he said, "I don't know what those would have been used for." Like, okay. As frustrated as police were getting, they then asked if he had ever had an affair with someone he worked with, and shockingly, he said, "Yes, I did." They proceeded to ask, "Well, what was her name?" To which he replied, "I don't know." The police were like, "Okay, can you describe her?" And Howard said, "No. It was 30 years ago. I don't remember." So, one of the detectives asked if he would be able to take a DNA sample from him, just a mouth swab, to see if he was possibly the father of the baby. He said no, he wouldn't allow that, and had asked police to leave because he had just gotten a phone call from his wife. He said that he wanted to talk to her privately about the situation, and police ended up leaving without the DNA sample. As they were getting up to leave, one of the detectives said, "Okay, we'll go." There was not a doubt in his mind that he wasn't involved with this. He said, "We'll leave now, but we're going to get a court order. We're going to come back and take your blood, and we're going to match up your blood with that of the dead baby and the dead girl, and we're going to come back here and arrest you for murder and put you in jail for the rest of your life." Howard nodded his head and said okay, and the police left. After they were gone, Howard went to Walmart and purchased a shotgun, and a short time later ended up taking his own life. He was found by police and his son in his neighbor's garage with a self-inflicted gunshot wound. He did not leave a note. Police then took a sample of Howard's blood and sent it off for testing in a North Carolina DNA testing lab called LabCorp. You're probably familiar with them. Because of the condition of the sample that was obtained from the fetus and its degraded state, they had a difficult time testing it. They were able to use a machine to amplify the DNA, so they could get a big enough sample to test against Howard's. The testing concluded that Howard Elkins had a 99.93% chance of being the father of the child. All that was left to solve now was the identity of the woman in the barrel. The document examiner was still hard at work uncovering names and numbers from the address book that was found with the woman, and sure enough, her testing found the name Howard Elkins and the Melrose Plastic Company. The examiner also found the words Residencia Nombre, or resident alien number, along with the phone number and address for a woman named Kathy Andrade. Police followed up with this lead, and to their surprise, Kathy was still living at this address more than 30 years later. When police had contacted her and asked her about the woman in the barrel, she knew immediately who it was. Her name was Reina Angelica Meraquin. She had come to the United States in 1966 from El Salvador, and she was a student in Kathy's English class. She had lived in a Catholic home for single women and was attending classes at the High School for Fashion Industry. Shortly after, she began working at the Melrose Plastic Company, which was where she met Howard Elkins. Kathy had described Reina as having a wonderful personality and that she was always talking about her family. Very shortly before she had gone missing, Raina had told Kathy that she was pregnant. Kathy said that she didn't know what had happened to her student and her friend, but she had always suspected that foul play was involved. Raina had never told Kathy who the father of her baby was, but she did say that eventually he was going to marry her. At one point, Raina did tell Kathy that her mystery boyfriend was actually married and had 3 children. Kathy was skeptical about him leaving his family for Raina. This upset Raina, and she actually ended up calling Howard's house, only to have his wife answer the phone. I'm not sure if she called intending to talk to his wife, or was originally hoping that Howard would pick up the phone. She told his wife that she was pregnant and that Howard was the father. Howard then called her back and said, "I'm going to kill you. I will never forgive you. I am going to kill you." Understandably, this totally crushed Raina. She told Kathy that she had made a terrible mistake and that he was going to kill her. Kathy repeatedly asked her, who was it? But Raina never told her who he was. Being very worried, Kathy went over to the home for single women and waited for over 3 hours in Raina's room, but she never came. Even more worried than before, Kathy then went to the police station to file a missing persons report, and she told police that Raina was missing and that she's pregnant, and police just brushed it off and said she probably went shopping. Literally, how frustrating. The police asked Kathy if she was a relative. She said no, she was just a friend. Unfortunately, Kathy did not know who the father of the baby was, so she didn't have much more to give police, and as far as I can find, no action was taken. I don't think that the missing persons report actually got filed. I don't even think it was written up. Investigators believe that shortly after her phone call with Howard's wife, he had gotten her to meet him at the Melrose Plastics office and had beaten her to death. He then brought her back to his home in Jericho, and they think his plan was to dump her body in the ocean from his boat. He had already had the barrel from work that he placed her body in and weighed down the barrel with the plastic pellets, probably to ensure that it would sink. When all was said and done, the barrel with Raina and the plastic pellets ended up weighing more than 350 pounds, which was why he was never able to get it onto his boat. The only thing he could do was push it into the empty crawl space, where it stayed untouched until Ronald Cohen removed it in 1999. Also, the fact that we only know about this now was because the sanitations were unable to take it back then because it was too heavy, makes me think like how close Howard was to getting away with it. I can't. Oof. A reporter from Newsday who had been covering the story since it broke and wrote updates ended up taking a trip to El Salvador, where he met Raina's mother, who was then 95 years old. He sat with her and told her that a woman was found murdered more than 30 years ago, and when he gave her the newspaper with her picture on it, she was understandably so distraught. I can't even imagine. She almost fainted and had to be helped up. She was crying and told the reporter that she had had dreams about her daughter for the last 30 years and had no idea what had happened to her. She told him that she had actually had a dream where her daughter was in a barrel, and that dream had haunted her for so long. Raina was eventually transported to El Salvador, where she was finally laid to rest, and her mother passed away just 1 month later and was buried with her. In an outrageously ironic twist, Raina had actually left El Salvador in 1966 because she found out her husband had had an affair and was expecting a child with another woman, and she had inadvertently found herself in the same situation, only this time she was the other woman. In what was potentially her final message to Howard, the document examiner found on one of the pieces of paper, "Don't be mad, I told the truth." And as sad as I am for Raina's mother, I feel at least she had some closure, and I'm very upset that Howard was never brought to justice. And it's just disturbing that for so many years, Howard and his family just went on as if nothing happened. Like, you know, his wife knew something. She knew something. His children got to lead normal lives, and he got to watch them grow up. And for Raina and her baby, they never got that chance. Please tell your friends and family where you are, where you're going, who you're meeting. Share your location. Use your very best judgment, and just be careful. Be so careful. Well, that is all I have for you today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.